recording this. Now, good evening, everybody, and welcome to a wonderful webinar brought to you by the Driving Instructors Business Summit alongside Smart Driving. And tonight we're going to be talking about the 4 pillars of a driving school, which Adam Bragg's going to elaborate on in a second. These webinars are brought to us because of the Summit and Tina and Kelly down at AD&D, who fund everything so we can get the Summit running. We want you to come to the Summit. John, Graham and Adam want you to come to the Summit, and they've put their hands in their pocket and splashed out on 50 tickets. So if you're serious and you want to come to the Summit, you want to see my ugly face, you want to see 3 wise monkeys above here, then please put your name down. We'd be delighted to see you. This is a private webinar, though, for Smart Driving. So even though it is recorded, and you will get a copy of it if you're watching live right now, it's only available for people involved with Smart Driving. But on Thursdays, throughout November, we are doing Standards Check Thursdays, and that's open for everybody. So, Adam, I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to stick myself. Yeah, I'm going to let you be the hostess with the mostess.
I'm sure I can do that. Good evening, everybody. So I just wanted to pick up from where we left off last week. Thank you for bearing with us. I know we overran a little and didn't overran a lot, but there's a lot to cover in sales and marketing. And we obviously now want to move on to the ADI skills and pupil management part of the 4 pillars. So just quickly, I'm going to introduce everyone. So I'm Adam Bragg. I'm marketing director for the Smart Driving group, Watch, Learn, Drive. On the seminar with us today is John Farlam, who's founder and our training principal and director, and Graham Lucas, who's our operational director. And David Poole, we've invited along to join us because David is someone that we respect as a marketeer and has worked in this industry for a very long time. And as much as last week was David's speciality, he does have some comments and thoughts on pupil management and ADI skills within the context of his 4 pillars. So David will chip in with his thoughts and views. So just quickly to recap then. So last week we covered sales and marketing. David, do you want to jump in here and just summarize what we talked about and where we got to?
Yeah, best unmute myself. Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the 4 pillars of the driving school, what they are, what it is, is a tool to help you analyze where you are in your business. So sales, marketing, skills of the ADI, and pupil management. And then look at each one of those and look at the good things, look at the bad things, but just use them as areas as a focus. So what we looked at last week is we looked at marketing, but not just about what am I doing for marketing, but it was also about what does my message and what do I do say about me, and what sort of message do we want to put out there, and what does that message bring back to us in terms of customers and the type of customer it brings back. And we also looked at sales as well, a little bit on pricing, and because marketing and sales does have this bit of an overlap, but for me, marketing is getting the word out there and preparing people ready to buy. And then sales is then when they start to get, closer engagement with you, typically when they're talking with you, and then you're converting them into a booking. So pretty much that's what we covered last week. And as Adam said, we're going to move on to skills of the ADI and pupil management. But again, please remember, this is always about you being analytical. We're not going to, the Smart Driving team, we're not going to teach you how to be a great driving instructor tonight. It's more a case of how do I analyze what I do in these 2 areas.
Yeah, so what we tried to do last week was trying to include as many questions as possible from people who are in attendance. If you do have any questions you want to ask, anything ranging from sales and management to ADI skills and pupil management. But what we're going to cover, we're going to look at ADI skills. We're going to talk to Graham and John and David about what does that mean? What kind of skills are you looking at? We're going to look at some of the buzzwords in the industry like client-centred learning and coaching. I'm going to look at CPD and development and ongoing skills. And I'm also going to ask Graham and John to think about what is their perhaps 2 top tips for knowing what's going well in a car, what's not going well in the car, and what they would make sure you do as an ADI when you've qualified, if they could give you 1 or 2 tips that are really important. We're also then going to look at pupil management. So again, what is pupil management? Why is it important? And pupil management ranges from physically the day-to-day managing of your diary, but also dealing with your pupil long-term. So preparing them for a test, payments. So we'll look at all those things that are relevant in those subjects and see if we can give you some pointers as to where you should be going once you've qualified and once you start working. So, guys, if we start with ADI skills, who wants to start with the question that we've been asked specifically? What are ADI skills? John, Graham?
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. What are ADI skills? So I think ADI skills are very far-ranging. I mean, we talked last week about sales and marketing, which is part of the business repertoire of ADIs. So whether you're working on a franchise or whether you're working for yourself, one of the skills you're going to have, because you're ultimately a self-employed person, is you're going to have a whole bunch of business skills. On top of that, we've got to look at what's happening in the car now. Adam's mentioned pupil management, but we've also got to look at training skills. Now, we've gone more into detail on that on the Thursday webinars as well. But we're happy to answer any questions tonight on training skills. But training skills, more importantly, I think, depend on people skills. Now,
yeah.
Some instructors are kind of naturally gifted. Some people are attracted to the job, like some salesmen and some people, the jobs where people deal with people. Some people are naturally gifted that way. Other people have to learn it. But the good news is it is something you can learn. So even if you're not, when you start out, if you're not a natural people person, people skills are perhaps one of the most important. And by people skills, I mean the way you communicate, the way you interact with others. Those skills are probably, dare I say, more important than any of the other skills. More important than the business skills, more important than even your training and your knowledge, is your ability to get on with people, to connect with people and to motivate people.
What do you mean by people skills then, John? I mean, as a salesman, when we used to work on people skills, we looked at building a rapport. We looked at helping someone identify needs, gaining trust. I mean, are you talking the same kind of things?
Absolutely, and particularly rapport building, simply because some of the customers that you meet won't have natural people skills either, so they won't have good rapport skills. So unless you've got the first one on your list, I think, was building rapport. Unless you've got good rapport skills, when you're working one-to-one, or perhaps even more doing team lessons where you're working 1 to 3 and you've got to manage the dynamics within the car, that ability to create rapport is so absolutely important. Also, there's some fairly basic communication skills in the car. The in-car environment is very different from almost any other communication environment. Now, as I'm sat here tonight, I've got my dog with me, and she's jumping up at the side of the chair, and she wants me to give her some nibbles. Now, when I give her nibbles, I turn around and look at her, and then she perks up and she looks at me and the tail wags. But if I were to ignore her and just look straight forward, she sat there quite kind of passively, not really interacting with me, still waiting very patiently for me to give her something, but she doesn't interact in the same way. And when you sat side by side with somebody in the car, a lot of the time, you're not in a natural communication position. When you're talking to people, normally if you sat side by side, you turn around and you engage and you interact. You can't do that when a car's being driven. You can certainly look at people, but even then, when you look at people, you've got to remind them not to look back at you because their job is to concentrate on the road.
And treat your pupils like you do your dog, John.
Yeah, well,
Make your body language obvious. I mean, I always find that my dogs know when it's time to go for a walk, or they know it's time to go and get some food. And it's because my body language is showing them what I intend to do. So you're saying
there tends to be an age difference as well, Adam. You know, not all the time, but I think the driving instructor is going to be over 30, 35, or old codgers like me and John, and there's going to be a 17-year-old sitting by the side. So there is an age difference and I suppose a cultural and a social difference as well.
If you want a top tip on that, based on what Graham's just said, it's don't try to be 17.
No, absolutely not.
You might be, even in your 30s. I was in the music business early on in my late in my teens and early in my 20s, and I like to think I've retained some of that culture throughout my life, and that I'm in touch. But wow, I'm not 17, I'm not 25, I'm not 35. You're whatever age you are, and you're in your 30s thinking you're young and hip. I tell you what, a 17-year-old thinks you're a granddad. I'm sorry, or a grandma.
So just on that subject, then, you two, do you find then that I see some instructors who wear a starched shirt and a tie and a sports jacket, and they're really smart and almost look like the headmaster. And I've then also seen some ADIs where I think if I walked in their shop, I'd walk out again. They're scruffy jeans, scruffy shoes, scruffy T-shirt, look like they haven't washed for days. Where do you two both fall on that idea of professionalism as a skill? Because if you're building rapport, surely part of that rapport is the trust element and the student-teacher relationship.
Absolutely. Just go on the dress code thing. I wrote something in an article for my members recently, and I think I've mentioned it before in the past.
It included the car, John. We talked about the car and the branding.
Well, the branding is very important. Yeah. But I used to be director at LDC, and my office was over a driving centre at Pontefract. And the worst case I've ever seen of bad presentation was a string vest. An instructor turned up in a string vest, shorts and flip-flops, and if he'd had a knotted handkerchief on his head, he didn't. But if he'd had that would have been... I've got
to unmute myself here because I think I can ace you on that one, John.
Go on, you can't.
This is really good with rapport because, I just wrote a little message in there about, what you wear. It really should be designed on who you're trying to attract. What do they expect from you? And I was working with a driving instructor in Nottingham, and this was right at the very beginning when I started this out, 2008, that sort of time. And he said, "Oh, David, I've got this new car, I want you to come and see it." Okay, no problem. So he actually came over to where I was. And he'd been telling me on the phone he's been struggling with retaining pupils. And he was coming up with all the excuses under the sun. I remember, they're on shifts. That was his big one. Because a lot of them are from McDonald's, actually. Oh, yeah, they're all doing shift work. So sometimes they can make it, sometimes they can't. And they don't get a lot of money, so the kids can't afford it nowadays, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he's really excited about this new car. And he's had it a week or two, what have you not. So I opened, it was a red Punter, if I remember rightly. He opens the passenger door. And in the footwell of the passenger door was a McDonald's wrapper, which you probably expected me to say that because, if that wasn't bad enough, his pride and joy was sitting in the back of the car. Now, his pride and joy sitting in the back of the car was a fridge. That was a Stella fridge, and he had it in the back of the car to keep his sandwiches cold. And what he'd done, he'd got the seat belts over it, to lock it into position, to lock the fridge into position, and had it going into the charging unit. And he said, and I asked him, "How long you got that in there for? What are you doing? You taking it home?" "Oh no, it's in here every day. All my students love it."
Yeah, of course they do. Yeah. I once upset a lot of ADIs on a forum on Facebook where someone had mentioned about having the dog in the back of the car.
Oh, I know a lady used to have a dog in the car.
And I said, it's the most unprofessional thing I've ever heard of. And a number of ADIs who yelled at me saying, how dare you call me unprofessional because I've got my dog in the car. I was absolutely flummoxed. I really was. I suppose, David, it's this first part of ADI skills, the rapport, and the people skills and the body language. It's almost an extension, if I'm listening to you correctly, of the marketing. So you've set your pitch for the marketing.
Yeah.
You've set a standard of what the people expect. So if they expect cheap and cheerful, that's probably what they're going to get. If you've set a standard of best price lesson in the country, smart website, great tools and products to give your pupils before they join, then I would expect to turn up and be presented with a smart t-shirt with the logo on, with branded material in the car to be branded. Am I on the right tracks there with what I'm saying?
You are. Can John and Graham just mute themselves, please? Why?
Yeah, we can hear you tapping away.
Yeah, you talk about continuity. Somebody comes into your business from point A, right? This is the genesis of it, and they've got a perception of you. So look. Let's just take the car behind you right now. That looks great. The car looks great. The whole image looks great. Looks sharp. Looking sexy. You're going to expect really good value for your money and a real good time. So then, what happens if the rapport that you're building with them doesn't meet those expectations? What we need to do is to match the expectations and surpass it. And sometimes I've bought cheap, right? And I've bought cheap, and I'll give you a great example: batteries. I've got a 4-year-old, kids' toys and all that sort of stuff. I know I am going to buy cheap batteries. And they're never packaged as nicely as the Duracell ones. The ones I'm talking about. But guess what? I know they're only going to last half an hour, then I chuck them away. But because I expect that, and I still will go and buy that disposable thing again. But if Duracell, with all their lovely packaging and their continuity, the continuity of the branding all the way through, that only lasted half an hour, you've got a rapport problem here.
Absolutely.
problem. And I'm out of there. It's really important to me because it sets a tone, and we have this thing called buyer's remorse. I can't think of the scientific word for it. There is one. But we have buyer's remorse. So they buy a lesson from you, might buy it 5 hours or whatever at the beginning, and then they're not happy with it, and the shoulders go, oh, right, okay. It's like deflating a balloon. And it's going to be harder for you to pick them back up, but you get it right. You get the rapport right. I've written some notes down here. You retain your pupil, so therefore, your costs don't get hampered. And guess what? The spin-off from that is referrals.
Graham, can I ask you a question on this subject? When we first met, we met when you were a training head, and I was an operations head at Let's Drive, and then we later met when you were running your own driving school. And I was surprised when I heard you talk about the guarantee that you offered to your pupils, that you encourage all your instructors to do this, that if they didn't learn anything in the lesson, they didn't pay you. Tell me how that fits in with what we're talking about in terms of the rapport and the skills of an ADI and making sure that the pupils enjoy a lesson. Because for me, it was making something tangible to all these ideas that me and David are thinking about and talking about.
Yeah, just to extend that a little bit, Adam, because I used to say, if you don't enjoy it and you don't learn anything, then there is that you don't need to pay me. And I encouraged. We ended up with 18 cars at one point. I encouraged all of my instructors to take that attitude. And what it forces, in many ways, is the rapport. And every few minutes, this is what we're going to do in the next few minutes. What have you just learnt? And how much did you enjoy it? And it forces the instructor to change, or maybe the pupil to change to a certain extent, to make sure that, together you're setting these targets and enjoying that session together.
It's interesting. I've always done money back guarantee. I do it on my ADI masterclass stuff for ADIs now. I've done it with everything that I've ever done.
In fact, every smart driving product has a guarantee, doesn't it?
We also do it with all our smart driving products, yeah. And occasionally I would get instructors that say, but what if somebody asked me for my money back?
Yeah.
I say, well, you give them the money back, But you've got to question yourself that if you're worried that people are going to ask for the money back, your biggest problem isn't the money back guarantee.
No, absolutely.
You need to be looking closely at what can you imagine that might cause somebody to ask for the money back, and address that straight away in your business, in your training, in whatever it is you're doing.
David's put a point on the chat. I don't know if everyone who's attending can see the chat, but what Graham was doing was reducing risk, and he was reducing risk on a number of fronts, I think, Graham, weren't you? But the biggest one was making sure that your ADI skills, which is something that you're going to be encouraged to do in your standards check and everyday job, is a 360 referral. You're making sure that you're always asking questions of the pupil. You're making sure you understand and the pupil understands how we're going to learn, and you're reviewing and reflecting every few moments.
We're back to rapport again, though, because that's all part of engagement.
Yeah, that's true, John. And I think what I'm trying to say is that, you agree with the pupil what's going to happen and get on and do it, but not for an hour. That's every few minutes. It's a case of how much have you enjoyed it? And,
No.
So if I move it on then, so we've kind of linked the marketing to the first part of meeting the pupil, perhaps, and getting into the vehicle. Let's talk about actually being in the car then. So
Adam, before we do that, there's something on my mind.
Sorry.
To digress and throw back for a second, just on the presentation thing, on the way people present themselves, and it's one of my pet hates. One of my absolute, well, there are a couple of pet hates that are related. We touched on the car and the way the car should look, and there's a great image of one of our vehicles behind you, the sort of the way we portray stuff. But one of my pet hates is what I call the trophy headboard. The trophy headboard. You get a car that looks maybe something like ours there, really smart, full wrap on, and on the roof is a UV faded headboard that instructor probably proudly had since the first day they started work as an instructor. And it's almost like, to them, in their mind, badge of honour. Everybody else is thinking, well, they're not even thinking, if they were thinking, they'd be thinking cheapskate, or gosh, that looks taffy, or something looks wrong there. But they're not thinking. It just, something's not right is what people feel. They get a sense of something's not right. They don't know what it is, but they look at the car and they think something's not right. And it's just one of those little things. The other one is the front near side wheel. People who keep a spare, buy some cheap wheel trims. If you've got steel wheels, take the manufacturer's wheel trims off when you pick your car up or you get your car. Get some cheap wheel trims, get a couple of spare sets, and if your instruction is such, or if you're unlucky enough to have a bump that your front near side wheel trim gets smashed, replace the damn thing. Don't drive around with a scruffy looking vehicle, and scruffy wheel trims or no wheel trims are one of the scruffiest things there are as well. And all those things just set up I don't know what it is, but something's not quite right when people look at you. It's just part of the expectation, part of the image, it's just one of my little pet things. So let me move on.
With the image thing, Adam, when we had reality driving school, and likewise with smart driving, everything's got smart driving on it. All the giveaways for the pupils, everything was loaded with, which was my school, reality driving school.
There is, with that, the only example, I'm sure there are other examples, but the only example that's springing to mind is my own driver active stuff, and this isn't meant to be a plug for that. But even if your materials and stuff don't match your car, they can match each other. So you're giving a course a coherent set of stuff. So if you give a handout, and I'm going to use my stuff as an example, but only because it's the only example I can think of. LDC is another one, but LDC have got everything on the car. But if you're giving a course The course would have handouts with in my case, driver active written on. The VTS, the visual aid use would have that on. The website you send people to would have that on. So it's something consistent. It's not a bit of something from here and a bit of something from there, and go and have a look on YouTube, and bits and pieces. And again, that's all part of a professional image. If you go to a college to do a course, you expect, whether it's a college's course or not, you expect something consistent as you work through it, not bits of stuff from here, there, and everywhere.
Can I ask a question here of everybody? And it's something I've just noticed. If you watch the newsreaders on the TV, they look at the camera and engage with you. I've noticed John looking all over the place and found myself doing the same thing, looking at the screen rather than the camera. I don't know whether it makes me feel awkward or what, but it's a really strange thing. I don't know whether David does it, whether he looks at the camera or not. But I guess in the car, when you're talking to people, to reiterate John's point, it's really important to look at the people you're engaging with.
One of the difficulties that John and anybody's going to have on here is that when I'm speaking to you, Graham, I'm looking at your face on here because that's what I would do normally.
Yeah. It's the camera where we should be looking.
Higher.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do get what you mean.
I get that.
One of the things that I try and bring in to webinars is, and even when I'm speaking, I'm normal. I'm not rigid. I'm not boxed. I will change my tonality. I will ask questions. I will use look at me now. I'm using body language all the time. A lot of it's very, very natural. I must say I'm quite lucky with that to a certain extent. So, rapport building, whether you're on a webinar or whether you're one-to-one with somebody, it could be through your body language, the way you look at them, the way you work, the way that you work with them. And as you well know, some people, I always look at people in the eyes. Some people don't like that. And because I always look at people in the eyes and I enjoy it, I know when people don't like it because they look away. Rapport building.
A tip, David, for anybody who doesn't like looking people in the eye, and it's a little game I'll often do on training because it comes up a lot. Quite a lot of instructors feel uncomfortable looking at their customers in the eye. Now, you've got to pick up on whether your customers want, if the customers are uncomfortable being looked in the eye, then you don't look them in the eye. But some people really do. Like you get people with a very strong handshake, you give them a strong handshake back, Or likewise, if somebody's got a limp handshake, you give them a limp handshake back. You just pause for that split second while you just check out their handshake, then just mirror it. But you get people who want to be looked in the eye. They want that full-on looking in the eye thing. And if you don't give it to them, they feel uncomfortable. Well, if you're uncomfortable looking people in the eye, just look here. Just look at them in that little spot just between their eyes on the forehead there. And you'll find when you do that, it looks to the other person like you're looking them in the eye, but it's actually quite comfortable and easy to do.
You talked about mirroring there, John, and I think mirroring is a skill that if you watch someone who is very gregarious and very outgoing, what you'll often find is you'll see that they mirror the person they're talking to. So often, if someone doesn't use, like first example, eye contact. If someone uses a lot of eye contact, you'll see the person they're talking to will do eye contact. They mirror what they're seeing. If someone uses a lot of hand actions and gestures, they'll do the same. And you'll find that nice people who are outgoing do it naturally. But you can actually learn these skills. And I think there's a great example of someone who's obviously tried to do it and not got it very well. Do you remember the interview with Miliband when he interviewed Russell Brand? He was trying to be a bit hip and cool, and he was giving it all the chilling out on the thing, and he got it really wrong.
Trying to be Russell.
It's very easy to try and overdo it, and I think you've just got to trust your instincts a little bit. Most of us are nice people, and most of us came into this industry to look after our pupil. And we made a point, didn't we, David, about when we're marketing to pupils and we're helping to plan their journey, what's their goal at the end of it? Part of it is actually helping them. And I think you've got to remember that when you get in the car at this stage, that part of what we're doing here is helping them. So if you genuinely care and you genuinely want to help, you'll genuinely do a lot of the things we're talking about. in building rapport and some of the other skills that we do.
I can let you all into something. She hasn't been announced yet. So please, if everybody's listening to this, keep it under your hat. But at the summit, I have a lady called Adrienne Carter. She's one of our speakers, and she's talking about this subject, and she's talking about the facial expressions that people give off as well. So from just facial expression, you can identify what mood they're in even before they get to the car.
Well, it's like we were saying with the dogs can tell, and people can tell. Let's rattle on because we're getting towards 1:30 and we've got a lot of questions to answer.
Let's see Paul Heathcote's question.
Sorry, yeah, let's do Paul's question. Can I ask the question, guys? When successfully gaining a new pupil, are there any favoured methods, templates for gathering feedback on how the pupil found you? What was their expectation? What do they value most out of the experience? Freebies, discounts, loyalty bonuses, referral rewards, etc. Quite a simple answer they did, isn't it?
Well, can I, start on that. Is it a simple answer? I don't know. Ask them is the first thing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
What Adam and I were saying last week, sometimes they don't always know, and that's because of your marketing mix. What the answer that they might give you in terms of how do they find you might have been the last thing they remembered, but they might have seen your car. They might have seen you at a local event, and their friend might be taking lessons with you, but their answer could be, oh yeah, I saw your website. But the truth is they might have seen 4 or 5 different versions of you out there. So it is a hard one to judge. John, Graham?
And it's interesting, David, it's great that Paul is asking the question, because a lot of instructors don't try to monitor or gather that. Quite a lot of instructors use some handouts that I produce. One of the handouts is a very, very simple, very basic questionnaire for customer feedback. And from instructors I've talked to, it's probably the least used handout of the lot. There'll be instructors who use my handouts who've never, ever used that. And
picking up on that.
Probably one of the most valuable.
Yeah, when I've seen these feedback ones, if you're going to use them, the best thing to do is I think the best thing to do is not ask them to fill it out now. Don't ask them to put their name on it.
No.
And you do a self-addressed envelope. So all they've got to do is tick boxes or write. And you tell them, if you send this through to me, it will be anonymous. I don't know who you are. And I'm giving this to all of my 20 pupils this week. Otherwise, you can introduce bias.
One of the things I used to do was now and again, perhaps every 2 or 3 months, is gather half a dozen pupils and buy them a cup of coffee in Costa on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning and sit down and say, come on then, let's have some feedback. How's it going? What do we need? And I found that, you could actually get some really good, honest feedback when they were there in numbers, in strength, if you like. And that worked for me quite well.
I hope that answers your question, Paul.
You're also asking about expectation on there.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the expectations to pass the driving test, but when? When do they want to pass their driving test?
My reading of Paul's question there is what is their expectation in terms of gaining feedback about what did you come to me expecting? And I think from what you're saying, David, the very important thing there comes back to creating that expectation so that when somebody picks up the phone to phone you, that you've already managed their expectation at that point to a degree.
Yeah, that's right. To flip it, when somebody phones me up for websites or SEO, before we even get into that and share with what I'm doing, I'm trying to find out a picture of where they are now or where they want to be. Because that's really important for them. And sometimes I say, this is not right for you. And I've had to say that, unless they do X, Y, and Z. So understand where they are now, understand where they want to be, and your services, whether you're in selling mode or whether you're in doing mode because they've actually bought your services, they take you along the journey.
I had one of my instructors, and I sat in the back of this car, and I cringed at the time, but this is a gospel truth story. I sat in the back, and she went to pick up her first pupil on the first lesson, and the pupil got in a car and said, "I'm really nervous about this." And the instructor replied, "You and me both." Imagine how that lesson went.
It's interesting that, because it's very easy. It's very easy to sort of
Flippant remark, yeah.
Yeah, to when you've just met somebody for the first time, you think you're building rapport, you think you're putting them at ease by not being flippant so much, but having a joke. You think it's a joke. You've got to be very, very, no matter how good you are at reading people, you've got to be very, very careful of the sort of jokes that you make. You've got to, even though it's funny to you, it might not be that funny to them.
Helping Adam to move on a little bit. When I originally came up with the 4 pillars of the driving school, when I wrote down ADI skills, the first thing that came in my mind was to make sure that you're on top of your game. And everything that we've been talking about is to be on top of our game. But the way I saw it was from a training point of view. And in the back of my mind, actually the front of my mind, it was all about, okay, when was the last time you were tested? When was the last time you had a trainer in the car with you, observing you on a lesson or a series of lessons? And, you know, this goes for PDIs as well. They go, oh yeah, I'm training with XYZ driving school. And I say to them, have you taken a second opinion from anybody else? Gents?
There's something really interesting there, David, that you've triggered. You just, I'm sure I've spoken about this before, but you kind of just clarified something in my mind that if you look at what ADIs tend to do when they're going to go to see trainers or whatever, it's because they've got a standards check coming along, or in the old days, a check test coming along. And it's as if they're then using the DVSA as their measuring stick, as their marker scale. Well, believe me, the DVSA do not really know that much about good training and a good customer experience. There are good SEADIs, there are good examiners, there are poor examiners. But I think if you're satisfied to use the DVSA as your standard, you're not hitting nearly the kind of standards that you could be hitting in developing, in giving a great customer experience. And I like to think of that. I mean, when people are training for standards, they don't tend to think about great customer experience. They tend to think about what does the SEADI want to see. And so the idea that going to get some training or joining an organisation for some information or something like that, when you know you've got a standards check coming up, it's usually the wrong time to be doing it, you know. And also, coming back to the communication thing I was talking about before, you want to be looking at things outside of the industry. You want to be on to people, to clubs like mine, if you like, or to the DIA or whoever, to get information within the industry. But you want to look outside the industry as well. Look at other things that are on offer that can help improve your ability to create that compelling customer experience, so that the customer gets out not wanting to get out, you know, so that they, and I tell you what, you know when you're getting it right, because when you're getting it right about on a significant number of the lessons you deliver, and at least on a couple of occasions every single month, you will remember it. About 40 minutes in, your customers will be saying, oh, can you fit me an extra lesson in? And you'll see it's because they're enjoying what they're doing so much, they want some more of it, you know. Can you fit me another one in this week? It should be happening every week. You should be getting at least one customer every week doing that.
We had 2 questions during the week that people have asked us specifically for this webinar, and they're on similar things. And I'll come to them in a second, but I want to give a little analogy before I do. I'm a big football fan, and I've recently read Sir Alex Ferguson's autobiography. Sir Alex Ferguson was Manchester United's manager, probably one of the most successful managers of all time in world football. And one of the things he said virtually at the end of every season, when they'd won the European Cup or the league, was we need to go and spend the most money on the best player in the world to improve ourselves. And that's one of the things that I think is the same here. And David's made the point in his comment. John was making the point that you need to continually improve what you're doing. You need to continue to be assessed, not just by the DVSA, because they're just assessors in terms of how you're meeting the bare minimum, but you need to make sure that you're improving all the time. And even though you can't get complacent, you can't be. We talked last week about a recession coming, and it's great that there's plenty of work out there, and there's probably not going to be a huge drop in the amount of work, but still, I think now is the time when you're on top to put your prices up, to get some training. So to the questions, what is CPD and how often should you update your skills? Graham, what is CPD?
Oh, continuing professional development. And as often as you can and as often as you can afford it is the simple answer to that question. I can remember I became an ADI back in, I can remember, 2003, I think it was. Having run a driving school and then started doing some work for Let's Drive on a freelance basis on part 1, part 2 and part 3. And then eventually joining Let's Drive as a trainer, becoming fleet trained, and then went to John, getting on to do coaching courses and client-centered learning and developing courses ourselves. I think that it's really important to keep the skills moving onwards and forwards and upwards, learning new things all the time. It doesn't have to be all about car training, of course, as John was mentioning, NLP courses and things like that.
NLP, Graham?
Yeah, sorry, neuro-linguistic programming, where you're looking at the customer through the eyes of the things that they see, if you like.
Yes, how they like to learn, how they like to take information.
Sorry, say again, Adam.
How they like to learn, how they like to...
Yeah, I think one of the, you asked for a couple of tips earlier on, and one of the things I would say is try and see things through a different perspective, through the customer's eyes. What is it they want to achieve and how do they want to do it?
Yeah.
Very simple. And how can you adapt your skills to do that?
Graham mentioned client-centred learning, John. What's client-centred learning, or CCL as we hear a lot about? What is it?
I covered this several occasions, but again, I can't remember if it was on this webinar, the standard check, last standard check webinar we did, but I talk about teamwork. And I often talk, client-centred training isn't about doing everything the client wants to do. It's working with the client in the client's best interests. Now, you don't determine the client's best interests, but also the client doesn't determine the client's best interests. The best interests are somewhere in the middle. You form a team together and you work together to make their best interests happen. Well, some of their best interests will be to pass the driving test, but other of their best interests will to be a safe driver. And you both have a role to play in that team, in that car, or in the team if you've got more people in the car. Just coming back though to the CPD thing, I noticed, and I think it's great that David put a note on the chat box saying maybe ADIs every now and then should do a couple of hours every 3 months, something like that, question mark, which I think is a great idea. But one of the most valuable and cost-effective and free methods of CPD is constant formal self-monitoring, reflective thinking, keeping reflective logs, reflective diary. I'll dig out, for members, I'll dig out my, I post it every now and then, I'll dig out my reflective form and pop it in the news tomorrow, or if there is a news tomorrow, I'm feeling...
John, you mentioned NLP and a few moments ago we were talking about CPD. It was a great question. I think it was on the lines of when should I do CPD? I tell you when I always do it, without fail, when I'm in an airport, because I always get there early. And I go to WH Smith's and I look through all the business books. And this one is how to sell
I've got that one.
You got that one, John? Pat Hutchins.
Looking, I've got NLP for managers there.
I take it you've borrowed that for somebody else. You see, CPD's all around us, and John's right. One of the things that I struggle with is actually looking at myself critically, because sometimes I don't know what questions to ask when I look at myself, and I don't always know what the answers are. I need that third person, so therefore I do go out and get one-to-one training, or I do go into a seminar, or if I want to start picking up on new ideas I haven't really thought about. Part of my job is sales, and I enjoy coaching. I enjoy the personal development, self-development, what have you not. So when I was in East Midlands Airport, probably, and I saw this, that's what I'm going to do for the next hour and a half. And I went through it, and I made sure I got things from that of great value. What did it cost me? $12.99. And I can go back to it whenever I want to. So I hope that answers your question on my side.
That's absolutely great. The self-evaluation thing, David, after you've been through that book, I'm sure you monitor yourself. And the form I suggest instructors use 2-3 times a week, just use a simple scaling method on, how do I feel? How do I do out of 10 on this particular aspect of my training? And the crazy thing is, the first few weeks you start doing regular self-evaluation, you'll probably find after 2 or 3 weeks, or you've done it 4 or 5 times, you're thinking, well, I'm just putting the same old thing down. That's the time to stick with it, because you will find after another couple of weeks, you'll be thinking more deeply, and you'll be starting to realize what you felt 3 weeks ago was an 8 out of 10 was only really a 5 out of 10 with what you could really achieve. And it's amazing how much you can develop yourself. And if you couple that with things like you say there, David, picking up, going into WH Smith, looking in the self-development section, looking in the self-help section, looking in the business section, seeing what's there. I mean, I have only a fraction of my books on the shelf here behind me. I've got boxes full of books like that, that I've picked up over the years. And some have only ever been half read. Some I've only got one idea out of, but that idea has been so valuable to me, And so that's
if we can bring it back to the car a little bit then, because we're getting to 9:45 and we've got to talk about pupil management a little before we go at just after 9 o'clock. What 2 things, Graham and John specifically, because you're both ADI trainers, what 2 things specifically would you say? Maybe do one each. Are the most important skills that you'll have as an ADI, or you'll use as an ADI, or if you could ask someone or tell someone to use them? John, do you want to go first? Graham, let John have the first one.
Okay.
John's just thinking about it, Graham. So.
Yeah, John's thinking. You go first, Graham.
Okay. For me, it is reflection. Reflecting every 10 minutes, reflecting every lesson, reflecting.
What do you mean by reflection, Graham?
So let's imagine you spent 10, 15 minutes with the pupil in the car, and it's gone really well. Why did it go so well? What could have been improved? What could you have done better? How did the pupil feel about it? Just reflect on that last 15 minutes, the last 30 minutes, or maybe the last hour with the pupil. Reflect on what was going so well and what could have been done so better. And talk to the pupil at the end of the lesson about how they felt, what went exceptionally well and what could have been done better as well.
If we look at the, just bringing it back to the DVSA as your bare minimum standard, the Standards Check SC1 form actually has specific sections on reflection and just has the pupil had a chance to reflect on adequate feedback. I can't remember the exact wording, Graham. Are you suggesting that you should be doing that every lesson, after every section of the lesson?
Yeah, at the risk of blowing our own trumpet, that the Standards Check videos, if people took that, ADIs, PDIs took that into every lesson with them, the Standards Check wouldn't be a problem, and lessons would be so much more enjoyable every time that the ADI, the PDI went out with the pupil, both for the pupil and for the ADI. And one of our trainers, Keith, whether he's on this seminar or not, I don't know. I remember I spent about a day with him, training him, talking about client-centered learning and doing the stuff that we now do all the time. And his first 3 lessons overran by 25 minutes each because the time ran away. He was enjoying himself so much. But he now reflects on everything he does and so on, and makes notes, and then looks back, and it self-skills. It improves yourself all the time.
John, your comment?
Well, it's very closely related, and it's training related. I was thinking, there's a theme of what I've been talking about tonight, and the theme has really been communication. And if we look at anything I've said, it's been communicating with customers, communicating with yourself in terms of self-evaluation. And I was thinking, well, what is the most important skill? What's the most important thing you can learn? And there was, I can't remember whether it was on this business seminar, possibly on a standardship webinar we did recently, when an instructor commented that his customers didn't respond to his questions. 96% of his customers didn't respond to his questions. I've thought about it quite a lot after, because I was a bit brutal. Because I said something, then he came back again and said, well, I'm asking perfectly good questions, they're just not responding to them. And my brutal response was, well, I'm sorry, but you're not asking perfectly good questions. And the single thing that drives all of our lives, right from being a toddler, right from when we can talk, is our ability to ask questions. It's probably the first linguistic skill that we learn, actually, because we develop the skill of talking, and the first thing we do with it is we ask questions. What's that? How's that? Where's that? When's that? Why not? And to be able to really become skilled with questions when dealing with your customers, but perhaps more importantly, become skilled with questions when you're dealing with yourself. And I think, I always think I've learned how to do this. And then I learned something more. I've learned, and I've always been good at communicating with myself. I've always been good at communicating with others through questions. But I sometimes see Graham, for example, sit down, and he'll sit down for half an hour with his eyes shut, just thinking about what the bloody question is. Because if you can figure out what the question is, you can figure out where you're going forward. If you can figure out the right question to ask yourself, if you can figure out the right question to ask your customer, you will find the solution and the answer. And when you're questioning with other people, in fact, when you're questioning with yourself quite often, it's the way you ask the question as well. There are several different ways of asking any single question. And it's, if you think you've learned how to do Q&A, you've not. And I include myself on that as well. It's one of the skills that you can consistently keep developing, the ability to ask questions of yourself and ask questions of other people. So understanding about questioning, very, very important.
No, I don't profess to be a training expert at all, but having spent so much time in your esteemed company, John and Graham, two of the subjects that we really try and press home with our trainees, with our ADIs, with our ADI trainers, with all of our staff, and two of the things that keep coming up every time we do reviews or we reflect on our training or reflect on the mistakes that are being made or errors that appear, two of the things that we keep finding within our skills, within our ADIs. Any ideas on what those two skills are? Something that we really talk about a lot within our courses and training. Either of you?
A bit loaded, that question, Adam.
Listening.
Yeah.
And reading.
the two, I mean, listening skills are up there. Paul, funny enough, Paul's just after the questioning skills, surely listening. One of the things I often find is not listening to the reply, making sure I understand the question, making sure that I've taken on board what the person is actually saying rather than jumping to my own conclusions.
I think Paul's comment there is very, very valid, because there's no point asking questions if you're not going to hear what comes back in reply. Yeah. And listening, incidentally, Paul makes the comment, one mouth and two ears, but you don't just listen with your ears. You listen with every fibre of your being. You listen with your eyes, you listen with your intuition, you listen, because often the words that go in your ears don't match. This is another thing I often see instructors looking at the windscreen or making notes or writing something down during a recap at the end of a lesson when the learner's talking. When somebody is talking to you, you give them your full attention, because
What's that,
only
John?
then,
What?
only then can you notice whether the words, whether they're being congruent, whether the words match the word, you know, whether they're saying yes and meaning no, or saying no and meaning yes, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Sorry, David.
I think this brings us really nicely into pupil management.
Yeah.
Because if they are talking to you and you're not paying the attention that, and so you're not paying attention and they pick up on that, then you're going to go a few steps backwards on pupil management. Expect cancellations. Expect them to go, well, it's expecting snow tomorrow, so I'm going to cancel my lesson.
David, I always used to, well, I still do say to people that every single learner that gets in the car should feel like they're the only customer you've got. Like you get out of bed once a week just to go along and do their lesson. Quite clearly they know that they're not the only customer, but whilst they're there, whilst they're paying for that period of time in the car, they should be the centre of your world, you know, and that's what real listening is about as well.
I completely get you, and I'm not knocking examiners. I'm not knocking instructors when they say I do 40 hours a week or I do 60 hours a week. But for me, 60 hours a week, 30 customers, put them in the centre of my world, I would find that a tremendous, tremendous strain. I couldn't do it.
Anybody. I think maybe if you're 23 years old and you've got lots of stamina, you could do it to a degree, but only to a degree. Anybody who tells me that they're doing 50 hours of lessons a week and that they're giving good training, I don't buy it. I don't think that it's possible. And again, no offense to anybody who's listening might be in that boat, but I don't think it's possible.
So what causes that problem? What is the problem? What is the issue that the instructors are experiencing there? What is it? Not being able to say no? Is it being desperate to earn more money? What is the problem with that?
I think there's a number of reasons for it, Adam. The first thing is route planning. We're back to the old chestnut again. But if you pick a pupil up and haven't got a clue where you're going, you aimlessly wander around having a general drive. And that is not the thing to do. There has to be a purpose to that drive. If you can create the purpose, then you've got a greater chance of achieving something. But if you just pick the pupil up from home and think, right, shall we go left or right at the end of the road, then that's going to be a dreadful lesson.
Well, it'll be long and boring.
And it'll be more tiring for both the pupil and for you. I think the point about not being able to say no, it's a whole diary management thing, you know.
Particularly in this climate where there's lots of work out there.
I would say decide the hours that you're going to work and stick to those hours, because otherwise somebody else suffers in your life, your family or yourself. You know, you promise yourself that you'll do a bit of shopping this evening because you're going to get some Christmas presents, or you're going to do something, get something for yourself. And then, oh no, I'll do that extra hour. Then you're depriving yourself. And those sort of things start to make you feel over a period of time, start to build a little bitterness about your job.
Yeah.
The money thing, if somebody's charging low rates, then they've got to do the 40, 50, 60 hours, low rates and high bills. But they'll also find that they usually have a higher churn rate of pupils. By churn rate, I mean turnover of customers that don't start with them and go through the driving test. They normally have a higher churn rate of customers as well. And that's all very taxing and very stressful when it comes to running your business.
When I came up to doing the 4 pillars and I wrote down pupil management, it was because I was thinking about how can you manage your client so they stick with you, stay with you week in, week out, but it's slightly differs away from the skills in terms of what they're learning. It's not about what they're learning. It's literally about managing their client. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I think it's considerations like diary accommodation. So being able to understand how to manage your diary. In terms of expectation, making sure that you meet their expectations. So what you set up that you're going to do next week, you do next week, regardless of what that is. Things like punctuality. You know, I'm not going to have a great impression of you if you turn up 5 minutes late every single lesson, or alternatively 10 minutes early every single lesson when I'm not really ready for it and I feel rushed and stuff like that. So those sorts of things would be fairly high up on my list there, Dave.
What do you think in terms of conditions, in terms of being able to, direct relation to pupil management?
That's a difficult one, David. It depends on the age of the client, and Adam might be able to answer this a bit better than me. But I think if they're under 18 years, you have to get the parents to sign a set of terms and conditions.
No, that's not true at all. I've looked into that. As long as the person understands what the terms and conditions are, so therefore you can bring age into question, but we're looking at somebody much younger than 17. We're looking at 8 or 9 or 10 maybe, and whether that person's got learning disabilities, anybody can actually sign their name to a contract. It doesn't have to be 18.
That's right.
And I guess it depends on who's paying as well, doesn't it?
Well, no, you see, the mother could be paying or the father could be paying, but actually the contract is between the person who hands the money over. So the parent could be paying the 17, 18-year-old, but if the 17, 18-year-old is paying you, the contract is between the 17 and 18-year-old and you, the user.
Enforcing it's another question, of course.
Pardon?
Enforcing it, policing it's another question, of course, as well.
I think terms and conditions are important, Graham, in the sense that you have to, it's part of the setting expectations. Everyone knows what happens should someone be late. Everyone knows what's going to happen should there be bad weather, or everyone knows what was going to happen should there be illness or something. I think it's just part of everyone understanding what's going to happen if. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're right, enforcing it sometimes needs a judgment call. Mm-hmm. If you've got a really good pupil who has been there for every single lesson, they're doing great, and then one day they just don't contact you and say, sorry, I was really poorly, make a judgment call necessarily.
But through the terms and conditions, you've given yourself the space to make that judgment call, and the pupil knows where they stand.
Well, one of the things there, David, and picking up on what Adam's just said, I would often use my terms and conditions that were there to protect me. For example, about lesson cancellations, I would use that to score myself a brownie point, because as Adam just said, if you've got somebody who's a good payer, a regular customer or whatever, I'd make sure my customers from the outset, just fairly business-like, nothing draconian, these are terms and conditions, these are what we do, you know, if I can't turn up, I'll do this, if you can't turn up, this applies. If somebody then messes me about, just whatever, for the first time, generally or whatever, I would make it a big deal. I'd say, hey, look, the terms and conditions say, and then the terms and conditions almost become a third party. There's something we talk
about. The boss said, I've got to do this.
Yeah, there's something I'd talk about, even though I've written them and I'm the only person in the business, almost as if they're nothing to do with me and I've got to stick to them.
Yes, third party blame.
And I'd say, hey, look, but tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to charge you half price and send them away with feeling good. Because if you build the expectation of you've got to pay me for this lesson, and then I just charge you half price, or I don't charge you at all, but next time, hey, we've got to stick to it.
I think all three of us in Smart Drive.
Ongoing marketing in those situations, and you can because it's very easy to lose customers over silly things like cancellation.
I think we would all agree, wouldn't we, in Smart Driving, that terms and conditions and terms of service are very important. In fact, if you buy anything anywhere in a shop, you will get access to a set of terms of service. conditions of what you've purchased. And I think it's important to do that. From a customer services point of view, it's important that everyone knows where to stand.
There's something else, Adam, I've mentioned once or twice this evening, that you've got a duty to yourself. And if you, for example, consistently have people cancelling and not paying, you would start to become bitter. You know, you go into the job bubbling and full of everything for the first 6 months, the first 12 months, but over the first 2 or 3 years, you'll grow to hate the job.
Well, I think you've mentioned that a couple of times, John, and I think I'd like to move on to, we're going to need to wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes, guys, because we're at 9:05 and we promised everyone this would be an hour. So let's get these last couple of bits out of the way. When I used to recruit driving instructors for a couple of the major companies in the industry, one of the things I used to talk to them about when planning a diary was, you know, generally, you've come into this industry to spend more time at home or put your family first or have a bit more control of your diary. What I used to say to people was, and I'd like all of your opinions on this, take a whole diary from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. in the evening, Monday to Sunday. There's about 100 hours there you could possibly do. And first thing you do is just black out the bits you just do not want to do. So for me, it's football. Saturday, watching Middlesbrough. Tuesday night, watching Middlesbrough. Every evening, 6 till 8, put the kids to bed. Now, when I was a younger man, the wife watches Coronation Street, Emmerdale and EastEnders. I'd happily work Monday and Wednesday nights. Happily. So what I would do is I'd plan my day like that. And I'd have maybe 70 hours in those gaps where I'd happily work. And it removes that bitterness to the world because you have your free time. What are your thoughts on planning your diary, managing your diary like that, guys? David, do you want to go first?
I've got a 4-year-old.
Me too. I know exactly how you feel.
You know, and your children come into it. And actually, we've got a family diary upstairs. It's a monthly planner. And I know exactly where it is. And tonight's webinar was put on there. And I've got all my webinars put in there up until the end of the year, along with other stuff as well when I've got to go to the UK and what have you. And Emily puts her bit in there. So I'm not just using my diary, we're using a family diary, because then actually that does allow us to put time together. We had a great instance only this afternoon. We're going to see some friends, Maureen and Guillaume, and they've said, oh, we can't make this day. Can you do this day? What did we do? We both went there. Am I working? Or has Andy got anything on? So for me, doing it, as you've said it, is perfect. And if anybody chooses to watch Emmerdale, Coronation Street, I just think they're grounds for divorce as well. Go back to your terms and conditions.
But it's because, I mean, people have got this idea in their mind of sometimes a 9 to 5 and they don't want to be sat at home on an evening. And I sometimes used to think, well, why? All I'm doing is wasting time, sitting with the wife, doing something I don't want to be doing. I could actually spend better time with the wife. I could be doing more productive things. We had an instance of an instructor just this week where he'd made arrangements with a pupil, a long-term booking, a problem pupil that he'd had, and he'd made arrangements to fix the problem. And he'd forgotten that he was going away on a holiday on one of these days. And he's wanting help about how to deal with it. I just think, how can you forget something like that? And like you said, if you've got a planner somewhere, and in your weekly diary, you block out the bits you just will not do and you say to the pupil, give the pupil, which would you prefer to do, Monday at 6 or Tuesday at 8? You don't let them see your whole diary because you're bound to pick one of your free spots, aren't there?
See, this is the trick, really, when it comes to client management.
Yes.
The first thing you need to do is be able to manage yourself. If you can manage yourself, then you'll be able to, you're halfway there to managing them, because as soon as they start saying, what about this and what about then? And they're shifting into your time, this no longer becomes fun and enjoyable, and we should be doing it for fun and enjoyment.
And you've got to be strict with yourself about it as well.
Yeah.
Many people come into driving instruction are what I call serial helpers, and I used to be a serial helper, and it was one of the skills I had to learn. Was although I said, well, that person's in the car with you, they're the centre of your world. That's the only bloody time really at the centre of my world. I had to learn that I don't exist to please other people. That's not my job. I love to please other people, but I had to learn that I could say no, and I could decide for myself what my parameters were. So I didn't used to work weekends much, and sometimes people will say to me, "Aha, John, but I've heard you say you used to work Sunday mornings doing motorways." Yes, I did, because every now and then, not every Sunday morning, but I'd love a 7 o'clock Sunday morning lesson, 7 to 10 on a Sunday morning, introduction to motorways, when it was quite, because it fitted in with me while my wife lay in bed.
There are PDIs on this as well, on here tonight. I'm thinking, when shall I run my diary and what have you not? Well, always look at your target audience. When are they free? You know? And lots of driving instructors work less during the day and work more in the evenings at weekends. Why? Because people are at work, they're at college, they're at university during the day. Not always the case. You know, people do get free periods and what have you not.
Yeah, especially sixth form, David. Yep.
Yeah, well, you know, when I went to university,
well, 6 hours a week we did.
That's what I did. Well, it was actually 8. It was 8 hours a week.
David, just a quickie, and we're running out of time, and I'm starting to get a bit woozy. I've been a bit under the weather today. But what are your thoughts on that? Thinking that you want to fit your diary to fit you as well as fit your customers, one of the things I've always pushed is what you might call a day saver, which means you charge more in the evenings. But that's not the way you don't say to people, "Oh, I charge more in the evening." You say to people, "I charge less in the daytime." And I found when people introduce a day saver rate for lessons, it's amazing how many people, just at the thought of saving £1.50 or £2 or something, can suddenly make a Thursday afternoon when all they could ever do before was 8 o'clock on a Wednesday evening.
Hey, you know what? B&Q are masters at that. They recognised there was a certain day in the week where they were quiet. I think it was a Tuesday. What do they have on Tuesday? 10% off for all pensioners.
Yeah.
And so then they're filling that day, and by filling that day, they're then freeing up their resources where they can put other, staffing resources and logistic resources and what have you not. And there are lots of companies that do that sort of things. Restaurants are good for it as well. They recognise what day is weaker, and they pitch it that way, and it can work really well for anybody who's selling by the hour, which ADIs do. So have that day savers. If you want to push them during that time, do it.
Can I just interject something here as well? Every Monday morning, at least every other Monday morning at Smart Driving, I don't bother switching the computer on for an hour. I clear the desk, I have a piece of paper and a pen in my hand, and I just sit and think. And I've done that for many, many years, including when I had a driving school. And I think it's really important to build in some thinking time, some accounts time, and some marketing time into that diary.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely. Because it's part of being a driving instructor. And if you just neglect it and put it off, it becomes the white elephant you don't want to do. You've got to factor it in. But just going back to the pupils, I think one of the things that we've mentioned a few times in a number of different webinars is that the public have a misconception about our industry. See, a lot of parents think it's a very easy job and it's a job only old blokes do. But they also think back to when they had lessons and they would have 1 hour a week for 10 weeks. But we know that's not the same anymore. And people often assume that learners will only have lessons in the evenings because they're at school and college. Well, ask your pupils. What I used to find when I was a pupil, this is going back a while now, but it's still relevant of my cousins and my nephews, is that most pupils won't ask you, actually, I work at Morrison's on an evening, or I work at Frankie and Benny's on an evening, and I finish college at 4. Now, I can't possibly have my lesson between 4 and 6, can I? Because I've got to go home, I've got to get changed, I've got to get ready for work. I can't have my lesson. Well, perfect time to have your lesson. I could give you a lift for your lesson. So talk to your pupil about where does their diary fit. How can you help them as part of their diary? Because people do have misconceptions about instructors only work on evenings, lessons are only available on evenings. So it comes back to that whole thing about talking, listening to your pupil. When
I'm writing text for people who want to sell intensives, one of the intensive packages that I encourage the ADIs to sell is 10 hours a week. And that 10 hours a week would be 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, but a time during the commute of the pupil.
Yeah, help the pupil.
Because because it's not 2 hours out of their time then. Because I mean, I remember I used to go to college. If anybody knows Sutton in Ashfield, the Snipe, used to live near there. 2 buses to get to college used to take me an hour. However, as soon as I started driving, it took me 15 minutes. That's the difference. So you can build that in. I think we are coming pretty much to the end of here. But when I was thinking about pupil management, Adam, when I brought the 4 pillars together, I was thinking very closely about terms and conditions. And I was thinking, right, okay, what problems have you got in your business right now? Okay, so they don't turn up, or it's snowing today, or what have you. Whatever situation that you've got in that's a problem right now, you could start to address that by putting that into terms and conditions. And I just thought that was a very, very low-level basic thing that anybody can do. So over the next few weeks, whatever it is, you start to see a bit of a trend of something happening. Look at it, think about it, think, how can I address that? And you can address it by sticking it in your terms and conditions and working with your T's and C's with that person.
There was just 2 last subjects very quickly, guys, and they're linked to what we've been just talking about, payments and block bookings. Any thoughts on block bookings and taking payments? Graham, you've more recently run a big driving school compared to the rest of us. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, block bookings are absolutely fine. We used to do a special which was reduced to £20 an hour from the £27 that we used to do for 5-lesson booking. But that tended to be the first 2 lessons and the sort of around the test time to make sure that those 3 lessons were at the end of the course, if you like. Block bookings are absolutely fine, especially if you're going to take some money up front with the set of terms and conditions. You can actually, you've got the money in your hands, so to speak. So you can say to the pupil, look, you've missed twice now. I really do have to, it costs me money to turn up. I've got nothing to do for the hour and so on. So the next time it happens, I will use some of the money that I have from you as a payment for that lesson.
I think it's also, if we're talking about managing a diary, one of the things that having a handful of block bookings does is it allows you to start knowing where you're going to be guaranteed for a number of weeks. You can help your diary management in terms of where you're going to be every day.
I was always quite keen that lessons after, especially as the pupil approached test standard, happened at different times of day as well. And like the school run, like the rush hour and so on, to make sure that there was as much experience as possible. And if it was snowing, it was always an opportunity to do team lessons, so get 3 people in the car and, very often you get the snow. So yeah, use it.
So would you kind of link your block booking then, Graham, to where the pupil is in their syllabus? So as they're approaching perhaps lessons 30 to 40 or 25 to 35, you'd start saying, right, let's use these lessons we've got then. We're going to go here in the morning.
Yep, absolutely. 2-hour lessons. And one of the things we used to do pre-test was actually make them find their own way we're in Coventry, to Leicester, which is about 20 miles away. Drive around the ring road of Leicester and drive back again. And just with these are the risks I'm going to help you with, these bits. And then also for us was a high speed emergency stop around 40 to 60 miles an hour, depending on the road conditions.
Last word for David then. Are we going to, do you want to wrap this up then, David? And just
a quickie on that, Adam.
Oh, sorry, John.
Before we do that, courses, not lessons, is one of the. You've talked about block bookings, which is good, but I would revolve around selling courses rather than just selling them individual lessons. The other way is make it easy to pay. It's quite a lot of instructors, and perhaps the majority will use something like WorldPay or PayPal now, but I don't think the majority take cards in the car yet. And there are so many systems now where you can have a
£30, John, it costs to have a PayPal card reader, wireless card. Absolutely,
you can have a card machine, or you can have mobile phone apps that will take card payments now. And so there's no reason for the commission that it costs. And it's so much, particularly credit cards, it's so much easier. And people's attitude to credit cards these days, including young people, it's not a big deal to spend 150 quid on a credit card. It's as easy to spend 150, 200, 300 pounds on a credit card as it is to spend 20 pounds.
People love, you're at that age, they love having credit cards. It's not you get them into debt, it's their choice. Get them buying a course from you, and a manoeuvres course. How many ADRs out there sell a 6-hour manoeuvres course or an 8 hours manoeuvres course, which is separate to your driving lessons as a bonus. A couple of quick things on block bookings. One, I'd recommend that you don't discount your price. So, for example, if you do £25 an hour and you do a block booking of 10 hours, you think the gross is 250 quid. A lot of schools will drop that down to 225. I wouldn't. I'd give them the 11th hour for free instead, because you're saving more money for a start. You're not losing 25 quid. You're losing the cost of a lesson. The second thing is, if you're only doing 2-hour lessons,
good point.
They're going to book another 10 hours.
Yeah, just quickly on that, David, just explain quickly the difference between, what do you mean by you're not losing 25 quid, you're losing the cost of the lesson?
Look, if you're doing 10 hours and it's £25 an hour, so therefore it's 250 quid, and then you're discounting £25 off, £25 is the cash that they would give you. But what you're losing out on is... excuse me, let me rephrase that. The cost of your lesson is what? Let's say your cost of your lesson is a tenner.
Your car, your fuel.
Your car, your fuel, absolutely, right? So if you give them the hour free instead, you're not losing £25, you're losing a tenner instead. That's what I mean
and
by
you
that.
Choose perhaps an hour where you were free anyway in your diary. You wouldn't take an hour out for somebody else. You'd perhaps use a dead hour. Fill a gap.
Well, what I would do is I'd get to the 11th hour, pardon the pun.
Yeah.
And I'd say, right, okay, so, we only do 2 hour lessons, so this. I'd break that gently to them first. Let's get another 10 hours booked on that credit card. And then you've now got 2 hours. What do you want to do? Do you want to have those 2 hours after this block booking? Or shall we save those 2 hours for the daily driving test? It's your choice.
Yes. Good idea. There's been a question from Georgie. Just want to answer that one. What about PayPal online? Georgie, I'm guessing you mean in terms of taking payments from customers. Absolutely. PayPal online is brilliant in the sense that you can now very quickly from the app on your phone send a money request. So
that's right.
What I would do before my lessons the day before or the week before is when I'm sending, you can even set them up to send reminders on a specific date. So if you're uber efficient, set yourself reminders so that the pupil pays in advance. When you send some lesson plans or reviews or lesson notes from the week before, send them a quick email with the payment reminders in.
And double guessing, I don't know actually what Georgie's asking there, but I know what you've explained very eloquently, Adam. But something some people still worry about is the security of PayPal. And I think PayPal's probably the most secure
I
system.
think it's safe. For me, it's probably the safest way to pay for anything.
I think so.
I will back your corner if anything happens. And we've had experiences, John, haven't we, where PayPal have said to us, listen, you're in the right. Your customer is wrong. However, this customer has been a customer of ours for 6 years. We'll give them the money back anyway. PayPal will even look after you as a customer, even if you've done something wrong.
Yeah. They've given the customer the money back, but they've let us keep the money as well.
Yeah, because we didn't do anything wrong. Yeah.
We've had 2 or 3. We're more than 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Georgie was saying she's thinking more about online bookings. I wouldn't do an online booking, to be honest with you. Online bookings work really well in this industry when the prices are cheap. If you want a decent pupil, in my opinion, my humble opinion, they'll pick the phone up and give you a call. If you want to flog lessons out at 20 quid an hour, just put a buy now button on it. If you want to sell courses, using John's phrase there, get to pick the phone up and speak to you so they engage with you over the phone and start to hoover up all the value that you can give them. I do have buy now buttons on my products. Why? Because I need to speak to people over the phone, and then I tell them to click that button there and then, because I live in a different country. I'm not in the car to take cash off them.
But I think you're right, David. For me personally, I wouldn't link an online payment to an online booking in the sense of being able to choose what hour in your diary. Perhaps unless you've got some short-term gaps in your diary you want to fill, maybe. But it would be to encourage because you'll get the customers' details when they make the payment, so you can get in touch with them and start a discussion and a conversation.
The real issue with that as well, Adam, is, you know, if you take Coventry as an area, you could be 7 or 8 miles between bookings.
Exactly.
It could be a 30-minute drive, and you know, somebody's booked one for 10 o'clock and the next one's at 11:15. You're not going to get there on time.
But PayPal is absolutely brilliant, and it's very quick. I mean, within 20 seconds, you could send someone a payment link and they could make a payment. It's really good. So that's all the questions answered that we've had, guys. So we've run over by 25 minutes, so sorry about that. But David, last word to you, because as David mentioned at the very beginning, this is very kindly put on by ourselves and David, but we're asking everyone to make the effort to come to the ADI Business Summit in the new year. And I'll leave it for David to talk about the summit. But we're going to be there, and a number of our partner driving schools are going to be there to talk to you about what they offer and the services they can provide. And we'll be there to talk about training and your life as an instructor. David, I'll hand it over to you for the last comment.
Okay, lovely. I know that John needs to go because it's 20 past. John, you should have gone 3 minutes ago. So leave your seat, John, and you shoot off. So the Driving Instructors Business Summit, it's been going for 3 years. We normally get about 150 people there, but actually we've had over 100 tickets processed so far. We're probably looking around about 200 people. What we want you to do, this is not like a normal conference. We want you to bring your business question. Now, that business question could be, how can my business help my personal life? Could be something like that. It doesn't have to be technical. But bring your business question. Listen to the speakers. Some fantastic world-class speakers. When I say world-class, I really, really mean world-class speakers. The trade stands have been hand-picked. Your Smart Driving there, they've been handpicked by me. Then I hit them over the head with a battered cucumber to get the cash out of them. But they've been handpicked. Why? Because I don't have trade stands there just twiddling their fingers, doing nothing. They're there for you to speak to and interact with. And you go to them and say, "This is my business question. What do you think? Where do you think I should be going with that?" So I want you to try and get your business question answered or get much closer to the answer. Now, we only charge £17 to get in, which is absolutely nothing. But Smart Driving have said, well, can we buy some tickets ahead, a bit like one of their block bookings, and make some tickets available for our members? So we've got that. So I've put the link up here very early on. But if you look in the chat box at the top here, Driving Instructors Business Summit /Smart Driving. So I'm just going to stick it in here. Click on that link, put your name in it, put your email address in it. I will personally contact you and I'll make sure that you get into our event free, courtesy of Smart Driving.
And I also said, if anyone does come and on the day purchases one of our products, we'll pay for the price of the ticket.
Brilliant. So you'd be knocking 17 off.
Because, David, all of the ticket proceeds are going to Speed of Sight charity.
Yeah, fantastic charity. I mean, we take driving for granted, but there's some people out there that can't drive or never be able to get provisional driving license because of their personal situation, cerebral palsy, blind, could even be French. I can say that. But no, seriously, what Speed of Sight do? They've got dual control cars. We're talking 2 steering wheels, and they take them on these fantastic driving experiences. They're touching a lot of hearts. They're helping a lot of people, and actually helping change lives. And we can get involved in that at no cost to us, and it's just going to be a fantastic day out. So please get on the site, find a little bit more about it. It's going to be really uplifting as well. This is not one of those conferences where you're going to be bored, because I don't allow boredom. In fact, people aren't standing up at the front. No PowerPoint. It's a chat show. That's right. This is going to be a chat show, but all about our industry. So David Hine is the presenter. Then we've got the guests coming on. They're going to be speaking to David in like a chat show format where they're sitting on a settee. I'm even doing my best to get a pot of plant. And then once David breaks into this and they start engaging, then the speaker will take over and deliver their speech. So we're doing that, and we've got some panels as well, panels of experts that John's on, so that we can actually get your questions to the panel. So it's going to be a fantastic day. Philip Allen has just said, I can't see a link. And my apologies, because I only sent it to John and not to everybody else. So there you go. Sorry, Philip Allen, my apologies, but there it is. It's in Mansfield. It's at Junction 28 or Junction 27 off the M1. Some people have said to me, David, that's 3 hours away. It's so far. Yeah, you know what? What are you doing in life? Why are you here? What are you about? Why are you a driving instructor? You know, what's the point of you being a driving instructor? And the point is this. You do it for yourself, you do it for enjoyment, you do it for your family, you want good things for your family, you like helping others, and you're doing that by helping people to learn to drive. But it's about family, isn't it? It's about what you want. What are your goals in life? What would you like to do? Where do you want to go on holiday next year? This is the big thing here, Adam and Graham. What is your legacy? What do you want to leave behind? Have a think about that. What's your legacy? And if you've not thought about that question before, start thinking about it now. Whether you come to the summit or not, what is your legacy? When you die, you know, what do you want people to remember you for? That's what it's about. I know what my legacy is. It's personal to me. What's your legacy? And use things like the summit to achieve it.
On that note, David, thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Magic. Do you want to do a little Skype tonight or tomorrow?
I've got 5 minutes. Why not?
Right. Tonight would be good.
Good night, everybody.
I'll turn my phone on. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in. We'll see you all soon. Take care.
Bye.